Hello, everyone. It is Kathy with Backyard Columbus, and I am happy to be back recording this podcast again. We have just returned from a trip to Turkey, and that is one of the other things that I love to do is to travel, see other places, but that creates a lot of work on the other side. So I had some podcasts recorded, some episodes recorded, got those out, and then, trying to catch up at work, and now here we are again. So anyway, I thank you for tuning in again, and today's episode is why starting a pollinator garden is a good idea. So, a lot of times I'm trying to think of what I would like to share because there's so many things that I would love to talk about on this subject, but it all kind of boils down to the same thing: bees, butterflies, flowers, native plants, that sort of thing, backyard chickens, all of the fun things that you can do in your own backyard. But I was taking a drive up to Groovy Plants Ranch, actually, with my daughter over the weekend, and this subject came up because I'm happy to say that I've joined the board of the Franklin County Pollinator Pathway. And in at its basic form, I will say without reading what's on their website, they connect people and pollinator habitats. Okay. And so she was kind of asking me, what does that mean? What's the big deal about that? Like, why would anybody care about that? And so I have written a load of things down because there's a lot of reasons why somebody would want to do it. And often, I think that people just don't think about it. You're busy, you're working, you may have kids, you may have pets, you just may have a really busy job, or you may have health issues and you just really don't have extra energy to go take care of all the things outside. Like, there's a kabillion reasons why people don't get to their yards, and they really just stick with the stock plants that came with the house. Either you bought the house that way or you built and they put in that landscaping package that does absolutely nothing for most wildlife, and people don't really realize that. To the average person, a plant is a plant and a flower is a flower, but that actually is not the case. Many of our plants, like bushes and some trees, loads of flowers, they are either hybridized in labs or they come from out of the country, and they are not native to this country, or they're not native to this area of our country. All right. And so that presents problems if you are wildlife in this area, like the bees, the butterflies. Those have actual very specific flowers and plants that many of them prefer, especially when you're talking about butterflies and moths that lay their eggs on certain kind of plants only. So I'm going to read this off my little piece of paper because otherwise I'm going to get lost in my words. Anyway, why on earth, if you were to say, well, why convince me why I would want to put in a pollinator garden. All right. So here is what I've come up with. I think it's pretty nifty myself because it's one of the simplest and most beautiful ways to help save the planet right from your own yard. Okay, so look, we're not talking about you're going to eradicate climate change. You're not going to bring back extinct species, nothing like that. But if you can imagine, and you've heard this talked about probably since you were in school, there's like a giant web of life and everything is in it. And that includes the things in our yards. I know that in the oceans, okay, I'm going to make a little parallel story that I hope connects the dots in your brain a little bit. But in the ocean, the smallest little critters feed the largest ones. So there is such a thing as krill. And to be honest, I should have looked this up first, but I'm pretty sure that krill are little tiny fish. They swim in great big schools. I mean, little tiny fish. But those little fish feed blue whales, humpback whales. I mean, they feed the largest things in the ocean. And if we eradicated all of the krill, the whole food web in the ocean basically would collapse. I mean, do you understand? So, like, when we start eradicating things out of our yards, like all of the insects, bees and butterflies are insects. But when we start eradicating those things by pesticide use, which most people don't think about that. You think, well, I want green grass, so I'm going to have a company come out and whatever it is they spray, it's not my problem, because you're busy and you don't think about it. But these pesticides and herbicides that they spray not only gets rid of weeds in your yard that you don't want, So I'll say in combination, pesticides and herbicides. They get rid of necessary things. All of it is toxic. Okay, even apparently you've got to be really pretty careful when you have an organic lawn care company come out. And I am not educated enough to give you the specifics about this, but they are all not created equal. So you have to really kind of do your homework and make sure they're not using this, this, and this. Okay, so that it's truly organic and really not going to kill the beneficial insects. Like, I understand not wanting weeds in your yard. We don't particularly want a ton of dandelions in our yard, but we don't spray for them. Okay, we put down corn gluten in the spring, in the very early spring, and we'll see how that really helps. I rarely remember to do it when you're supposed to do it. It also helps mostly, I think, with crabgrass, and we have a terrible problem with crabgrass. But at the end of the day, we are not trying to have a golf course, so green is green. And I don't really care whether it's clover. Crabgrass is kind of a pain. It's not that pleasant to walk on, but it's really not the end of the world, okay? But we have been so conditioned on how a lawn should look instead of how a lawn really should look. And so I'm going to jump down to, I better see, this is what happens if I start going off on tangents and don't look at my notes. I will just turn this episode into like an hour and a half and just go down 1,000 different paths of all the things about what you can and maybe could consider not doing in your yard. So I will say this, because this is kind of a nice thing to think about. When you plant a pollinator garden, you create a safe haven for bees, butterflies, and other vital insects that keep our food system alive and your yard functioning. So that is actually a really big deal. And, I have never heard anyone come home and say, man, I saw a bunch of butterflies in my yard today and it really made my day suck. You know what I mean? Like, nobody says that. Even my sister, whom I love dearly, and she's an amazing person, is not that fond of flying things, and she's even coming to the dark side and starting to appreciate butterflies. I mean, you may not want to touch them, you may not want to hold them and all that kind of stuff, but they are nice to look at when they land on a flower. That's just happiness, And so did you know that 1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat depends on pollinators? So this is really rather a big deal. Now, look, unless you live on a farm, obviously you are not going to cause the breakdown of our whole food system. But this again comes back down to a whole connected web of things. And so kind of getting back to, my daughter asked, why is this such a big deal? If we each do our part, then house by house, block by block, and neighborhood by neighborhood, we have created these habitats that have been demolished. So, again, a kabillion years ago, there was no problem. We had loads and loads and loads of land dedicated to wildflower, like what do you call those things? Like fields, okay? Fields of wildflowers, forests intact. And actually, so let's think about, or I'll share with you, rainforest areas. There are things called wildlife corridors. And because there are several kinds of animals that will not cross, and again, I can't tell you exactly what they are right now, they won't cross open areas. They're not just going to come out of the forest and bask in the open sunlight and all of that. They don't feel safe. It's just not their jam. Okay, that's the most scientific I can get about that. I am a rainforest buff, but that's not my primary career. So I'm just telling you in general. So what they do is they create wildlife corridors where rainforest areas have been destroyed. So they create skinny little patches to connect area to area. Okay, so at least they start there. So that helps to rebuild the areas that have been demolished. So within our neighborhoods, I mean, you can drive down the freeway and just see open areas of land that are literally doing nothing. There's no trees. There's not even wildflower fields. So imagine if you are a monarch butterfly and you have to fly from, let's just say, Ohio, which is where I'm located. You need to fly from Ohio because monarch butterflies migrate to Mexico. The eastern migratory monarch migrates to Mexico every year. Okay, it's a generation after generation thing. Generation number 5 ends up in the Northeast United States and into Canada. And then every fall, they fly over, I think it's over 2,000 miles, if not three, but let's say a couple thousand miles all the way to Mexico. Well, in order to make it to Mexico, we're going to not even count like hurricanes, wildfires, crazy stuff like that. Just say the temperature is perfect, all right? And all conditions are perfect for that butterfly to fly to Mexico, where it overwinters and then starts the whole life cycle and the whole migration again. But if everything is perfect, they need food to eat. And I personally don't even like driving 2 hours down a freeway with nowhere to stop to get a bite to eat. And that's what a butterfly needs, a monarch butterfly needs in order to get to Mexico is food. Okay. And so if there is nowhere to stop and they need nectar producing flowers, and if they are going like miles and miles of just freeway and open, desolate fields, they're going to drop dead. I mean, that's just a fact. You can't resuscitate the dead butterfly. So this is where, again, house by house, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. So at least, close to those open fields of nothingness, there would be a neighborhood full of pollinator plants. Okay, so so butterflies are a big deal. Bees are another big deal. People get so freaked out still by bees, and I've said this before, it really kind of shocks me, unless you are deathly allergic, and then I totally get it. But let's take your average human that's not allergic to bees. You just remember when you got stung when you were 8. So, okay, that's because they had a nest in your play set. You know what I mean? These things happen, but as an adult, it's rare that you would get stung just minding your own business and having flowers in the yard. I take macro photos of bumblebees every summer, and I have never been stung. No close calls. The only thing that has ever stung me are those jerks of yellow jackets. So otherwise, they're pretty harmless, okay? But in case you didn't know this, I've had a couple of people ask me about beekeeping, and beekeeping is a fun hobby. Beekeeping, honeybee keeping is a great way to get honey, but it is actually not conservation. And if you did not know this, I am pretty sure that this is pretty close to right. And my cat is up on the counter here right behind my camera. Hopefully she doesn't start knocking stuff over. Anyway, we have not had a native honeybee. So native honeybees are not native to the United States, all right? They are European, and it's kind of no harm done. But if you're ever into thinking about beekeeping for conservation purposes, that's not necessary. We have not had a native honeybee in the United States since, listen, I'm going to make this up, like the Paleolithic era. I mean, like way, way, way long time ago. So our native bees, like the bumblebees and everything stemming from that. I mean, there's loads of different kinds of bees, but honeybees are not one of them. So anyway, I'm just throwing that tidbit in there. But actual conservation of bees, if you want to save the bees, you need to plant native plants. Native to your area, native to the United States would be great. There are some exotic flowers that will do the job, but I would recommend keeping those to a minimum. And there are so many things that are native to your area that you could go, I mean, it's just an endless list. We don't have a yard big enough to plant all of the native Ohio flowers that we could. Okay, it's just not possible. So the point of that is there is an extensive list, and you can get an extensive list. I have to look over here. Now my cat is up on all of the shelves in our built-ins. Hopefully I don't have to pause this. She's a wily one, a wily little black cat. Anyway, I think I'm safe now. You can download a PDF from the Ohio State Agricultural Extension, Native Pollinator Plants of Ohio, and you will get by season, by light requirements. It's a really great, I'll try to remember to put that link in the description of this episode. Anyway, this is another thing to think of. See, back to my list. When you grow native flowers, you're not just making the space prettier, you're repairing broken ecosystems and supporting biodiversity and giving threatened species a lifeline. So, I mean, that is pretty self-explanatory. I have a very good friend, and I totally understand her thought on this. she thinks that the whole monarch butterfly decline is a hopeless situation, and I do understand why she feels that way, but I don't agree with that, only because we're not trying to save the last rhino, the last white rhino. That is a much bigger problem and a much bigger animal, and you've got to do all of this stuff to breed it and all these things. We're talking about bees and butterflies. And on a very basic level, if each house in your neighborhood just had one or two native plants, and I'll get to host plants in just a second, the problem would be solved for food. Okay, for bees and butterflies, we want to provide a source of food or they'll die. I mean, if there was no nectar producing flowers, there would be no more bees and butterflies. If we all just had a tiny bit, and I'm talking 3 pots or 12 square feet, I mean, not very much at all. A little strip by your sidewalk, one side of your house, I mean, a few pots on your patio. It doesn't really take much at all, but the bigger problem is most people don't have anything. Okay, so if you do a little, and say your brain is starting to roll around like, hey, she's making a little bit of sense, maybe I could do a little bit. Hey, just get 1 16 square foot raised bed and put some different pollinator plants in it, or get 3 or 4 pots and put those on your balcony, your porch, anywhere there's full sun. That's the best way to start out, is just get the full sun side of your house. And if you have no full sun and you're all shade, there are plants for that as well. All right. So a small patch of native plants can ripple outward, and this is a really cool thing to think about. Connecting to other gardens and green spaces to form wildlife corridors, which are pathways, which is a major reason why I decided to join with Franklin County Pollinator Pathway, because this is what they are trying to do, is connect pathways on a grassroots level. So it's a way to be part of something bigger, make a difference that's both tangible and deeply rewarding. So see, just like my friend is starting to feel like things are getting hopeless. I mean, in the political climate that we're in, people are feeling very defeated. They're feeling very frustrated. Or look, if you're not feeling very frustrated right now, maybe you were feeling very frustrated and defeated a couple of years ago. Okay, point is, those things are cyclical and somebody's all ticked off. So this is something that is very fixable, and it is very easy to fix it. Okay, and in order to fix it, that means you need to be part of the solution. We need to be part of the solution by planting these native plants. And that is such an easy thing to do. You can get a $2.50 pack of seeds, plop them in a pot, and you've helped. You know what I mean? And then again, your neighbor might do it. Maybe you and your neighbor do it together. And now we're growing outward, just as I read. So that really helps to, I don't know, put a little spring in your step that you've helped do something that's good, and it is very tangible. And then you get to come home to something pretty. I mean, again, when have you ever come home to flowers and been like, man, those are freaking ugly? I mean, like, nobody says that ever. You just smile when you see the flowers in your yard. So going back to the beginning, this is what I was talking to my daughter about. I mean, most people don't understand that a flower is not a flower is a flower. So back to the hybridized flowers with the fancy names and the unnatural colors. Those are often sterile. Not always, but often they're sterile. And you wouldn't know that because nobody tells you that. So I would not trust just buying any flower at Lowe's, Walmart, Home Depot, things like that. I would be more assured that you're buying something that is not sterile at a local nursery, but I would ask, because you can still buy sterile hybridized flowers that have fancy names like Erasmataz, coneflower. I'm making that up, okay? But coneflowers are probably a safer bet no matter what the color is. But there are other things, like, I'll tell you, this is a perfect example. Mums are all of the rage in the fall. Mums don't feed a thing. They're pretty in pots, but they don't feed any butterflies. They don't feed any bees. They don't do anything but sit there and look pretty. Asters, on the other hand, which are in the same family as mums, actually produce nectar and pollen every single day for the late season butterflies and late season bees. So again, if you walk in, you're just going to see hundreds of mums at the place that you went to, and you're like, wow, I've got flowers. This will be great. And then in the back of your mind, your brain's thinking, oh, that'll feed bees and butterflies too, hot dang. But it doesn't. So we need to be, that's why I like doing these podcast episodes, is to help bring awareness so that you understand. Okay, so number one, we need food, but then it goes a little bit more technical with host plants. And again, I was explaining this to my daughter, is most people don't understand that, if you're like a deer, okay, and you have a little fawn, they can have that anywhere. They don't have to go to a certain part of the woods. They don't have to go to a certain cave or hole or anything like that. They just go plop one out somewhere. But that is not the case for butterflies and moths. Every butterfly and moth has a specific host plant or host plant family. And those specific flowers or grasses or trees, if this is the easiest way to explain this if this is new information to you, a monarch butterfly will only lay its eggs on species of milkweed. And here is why: because when that egg hatches, the resulting caterpillar needs those leaves to eat. That is just in its DNA. It will not eat anything else, okay? Swallowtails, a black swallowtail butterfly, it lays its eggs on members of the carrot family, so dill, parsley, rue, fennel, something else I'm forgetting anyway, but you get the idea. Okay, so those few basic things, it lays its eggs on those plants, and then the eggs hatch, and that plant is what the caterpillar eats. And don't worry, it doesn't eat the whole thing. It's not like it destroys it. But without milkweed, for instance, for monarch butterflies, there would be no more monarch butterflies. I mean, that is the absolute end. So getting back to being part of something bigger and doing your part, you plant one pot. Milkweed actually will grow in a pot, and it will come back every year all by itself, unless something happens to the pot. Anyway, one pot of milkweed, if a fourth of the neighborhood had one pot of milkweed, like in all the neighborhoods, there would be no issue with monarch butterflies. Milkweed typically grows in fields. All the fields are wiped out with corporate, what do you call those? Corporate parks, apartment complexes, parking lots, strip malls, housing complexes. And then those housing complexes just put in landscape stock, regular bushes, like boxwoods and I forget those other prickly things that are called anyway. So they don't have anything that bees and butterflies can use, okay? So anyway, house by house, block by block, we can restore these habitats in a different way. Nature sometimes is not all that picky. We just need to help it along. So let me see if I've covered everything. I would have a little assignment for you. Next time you're driving home, leaving home, or coming home, just take a look at a few houses along your street, and you will see usually both sides of people's houses have absolutely nothing on it. So there is an opportunity to plant a small pollinator garden, usually in the front of the house. I mean, look, you could pick any part of the yard. Most people just have one tree, a few boxwoods or yews or junipers or whatever all those evergreens are, and hostas, which the only thing that's happy about that are deer. Deer love to eat hostas. Anyway, they typically don't have many pollinator plants. So once it's brought to your attention, then you start to notice these things. And for me, because I'm all sucked in, it starts to kind of affect me. I'm like, I wish I could do something about that. And so the only thing that I can do is share the knowledge that I've gotten and hopefully encourage you to think about this over the winter. Hey, reach out to me if you have any questions. I will do the best I can. I'm not an expert, but I'm definitely passionate and decently well-read on the subject. I will help you. I will help to think of ideas for you and point you in the right direction. If you don't have the time, but you have some money, I know some companies that will put in different size pollinator gardens for you with all the instructions on how to take care of it. So anyway, I think that is it. And I hope that you have gotten something from this 2 times longer of an episode than I meant to make this. Anyway, because it's pretty late and I need to get to bed soon. But thanks for listening. I hope you'll share this with your friends and have an amazing day.